Hey everybody, welcome back. Today I've got an awesome video. I'm going to show you how to access your network without the need to port forward. That's right, we don't need to be able to expose it, and this will be great for all of you guys who do not have access to a router or are behind something like CG NAT, carrier grade NAT, where you don't have a public IP address. To do all of this, we're going to be using Headscale. That's the open source implementation of Tailscale, so you get to self-host Tailscale, maintain your privacy, and have pretty much all of the functionality that natively is given to you by Tailscale. So how is this useful and why might you need to use it? Well, in my previous video where we deployed Headscale on our own infrastructure, which is a great option because it means everything is self-hosted. However, some unfortunate folk don't have that luxury. Either your ISP doesn't allow you to port forward, or maybe you're in a multi-tenancy setup and you don't have access to the router itself. So what can you do? Well, in that last video, we hosted the controller on our infrastructure, which means to access that, you're going to have to port forward. Now, as I said, some people can't port forward. So what do we do? Well, we simply mix up that infrastructure. And we accomplish a VPN by deploying the controller on a VPS, a virtual private server. So this is just a computer in the cloud somewhere else. In this video, I'm going to show you how to do that using Oracle's free tier, but you could use any cloud provider you wish, and it doesn't have to be a free tier. You could already have a VPS and you could add this to it. It's really up to you. By the end of this video, you'll be able to remote into your network, and you'll also be able to remote out of your network. Yeah, that's right. You can basically use this as your own VPS server. So you could spin up clients anywhere around the world using any cloud region, and you could route out of that node to get around geo-blocking. This really is a powerful tool. So without further ado, let's get into setting this up. I'm going to show you how to set up a VPS within Oracle Cloud, but as I said, you can use any cloud provider that you want. We'll then look to install Headscale, and in this video I'm not going to be using Docker, I'm going to be using the bare metal for 3 reasons. 1, because we did Docker last time, so let's try something different. 2, because Docker is going to use more resources. And 3, because we're using a VPS, and in this case it's only got 1 core and 1 gig of RAM, so I need to keep this lean. Once we have this set up and configured, I'll show you then how to set up the routes and how you can actually then connect to each device and exit from each device. It's quite complicated to work all this stuff out, so I'm going to put this as simply as possible for you guys. Let's get into it. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do is sign up to the Oracle free tier. To do that, we just need to head over to their website and create an account. It's pretty straightforward. You will need to have a credit card available to do this, so just bear in mind there may be other providers that don't need that. And as I said, you don't have to use Oracle, you could use whoever you want. Amazon also do a free tier. Once you've made your account, you're going to be presented with the dashboard. And the first thing we're going to want to do is to create a new instance. So to do that, we can click on the instances compute. If this isn't here and pinned, I've used this previously, just have a look in the services at the top and you can search for it there. Clicking on instances, we want to create a new one, and this is the free tier, so we want to make sure that we create a free VPS. Now to do that, we click create an instance, and you can give it whatever name you want. I'm just going to leave it as the default here. The bit that's really important is that you click and edit the shape. Now the shape is the bit that determines the image that is given. In this case, it's using Oracle's own version of Linux. But you could change this to something like Ubuntu if you wanted to. You do that just by clicking change image and then choosing what you want. Just make sure that it's always free eligible. And when you click on one of these, it's going to come up with a suggested machine type. So if I click on this and then I click select the image, we want to then go down to the shape. So the shape is the size of the machine. So we've specified the image, and this is a bit like Proxmox. Now we want to specify basically what the virtual machine is. So this is an always free tier again. It's using an older AMD EPYC CPU. Now it's only got 1 core and 1 gig of RAM. It's pretty anemic, but it's more than good enough for what we're going to need it for. And I've tested 6 clients on this and it's been absolutely fine. But if you did want to change the shape, it's as simple as clicking the button and then choosing which chip you want to use and how big you want it to be, i.e. things like core count, RAM count. So I'm going to leave it on this one, which is the free one, and it's going to be an AMD single core with 1 gig of RAM. Let's have a look down here. We haven't created a VNIC yet, a virtual network interface card. We can do that in a moment. And we probably want to do this at the same time, which is to save the SSH keys. Now, this is what's obviously going to allow you to log in with your client. If you don't have this, then you're either going to need to use no SSH keys and fall back to a password, which is never a good idea, or generate them later. So let's click Save Private Key, and that will download it now in the background. So before we can deploy this, we need to go and set up the virtual NIC. So let's do that. So I can either select the existing one that I've been using already, or I can create a new one. So for this video, let me create a new one. So I'll create a new virtual cloud network. I've already created this compartment because I've been using this for a while, but just create your compartment. I've just used Jim's Garage as my root. The subnet I've just left as default, but obviously you can change this if you want to. And I've selected that I want this to have an IPv4 address and a public IPv4 address because we want to be able to access this. Otherwise, you're going to be in the same position that you were and while you're watching this video, you won't be able to route to it. So once you've done that, you should be able to create now. So let's hit create. In the background, this is going to be spinning up that new virtual machine, and it should now take us back to the dashboard where it's creating it. So as you can see here, it's provisioning that new machine, and shortly this will be up and running. And over here on the right hand side, yep, we've now got an IP address. So with the IP address and the SSH keys we downloaded, we should now be able to connect to this through something like PuTTY. Let's go ahead and do it. Unfortunately, you're going to actually need to migrate this key first before you can use it in PuTTY. So to do that, you need to fire up PuTTY Gen. So if you've installed PuTTY, this comes shipped with it. So if I fire up PuTTY Gen, I can load the file we just downloaded, select the file we just downloaded, which is the SSH key here, click open, and as you can see, it successfully imported the key and it's in an old format. So to use this with PuTTY, simply click OK, and then we want to save the private key. So I recommend you add a key phrase here. So this is a key to encrypt your key. I'm not going to do that for this video just because I want to make my life easier, but I do recommend you go and encrypt this key. So click yes, and I need to give it a name. So I'm going to call this one Oracle 2 just because I already have an Oracle key anyway for my existing server. Hit save. We can close down PuTTY Gen now, and then back in PuTTY, we click browse. I'm going to use Oracle 2, and I'm going to go back to the session. I'm going to give this a name. I'm going to call it Oracle 2, and I'm going to save that just so this stays within PuTTY and I don't have to put these details in every time. Now, when I click Oracle 2, I click load, and then I can click open, and it's going to come up and say, this is the first time that it's seen this. Do you want to trust this key? I'm going to click accept because I know I've just created it. When I click that, I'm then presented with the login. So on this one, I'm going to type in Ubuntu, which you can see in the background here. So Ubuntu, and voila, I'm into that VPS we just created. That was pretty simple, right? So now we've got the VPS set up and we're logged in. We're ready to begin deploying Headscale. So let's head over to the documentation and start that process. Now to deploy Headscale, it's pretty straightforward. We do a wget, a web-get, to get the file that we want to install. We then install it. We then enable it within the system. We edit the config, and then we actually start the Headscale server. So let's pick the version that we want. I'm going to use the latest version, and because I'm running Ubuntu, I'm going to choose the Debian one, and I'm going to choose the AMD 64 because that's the instruction set. So I'm going to right click and copy that, and we'll amend this comment here with the link that we just copied. So now when we run this, it's going to go away and it's going to download that file. As we can see, downloaded really quick, 61.3 megs per second, so you can see the throughput you're going to be able to get on this. I think it states it's 0.5 gigabit per second on the website. Next, we're going to want to actually install it. Now we've downloaded that file, so let's copy this command. That's going to go ahead and install in the background, as you can see, really quick. So we want to enable Headscale now, so let's copy the following command. Now that it's enabled, we need to go ahead and configure Headscale. So let's jump into the config file and I'll walk you through a couple of the steps that you need to change. So do a nano into etc headscale config.yaml, and if you get the message on here that I got, it's because I'm using a minimal Ubuntu image, so it doesn't come shipped with nano. So let's get nano for you quickly. We need to run an update, so it's going to go through and check all the libraries within Ubuntu. Once it's done all of that, it should find nano and we should now be able to install it. So now when we run this again, it's just gone and installed nano. So hopefully we should be able to press up to our previous command and we should be able to edit the config file. And make sure that this is using sudo because it's owned by root currently. So now we're into the config file, and if you cast your memory back to my previous video, it's basically the server URL and the listen address that we need to change. The rest of it for this video, I'm not going to tweak. Do go and check the documentation though, because there's a number of things that you might wish to add to this. For instance, I'm not going to be putting a reverse proxy in front of this because there's not really any need to protect that web page, and besides, it's only doing SSL encryption. There's nothing important on there that we need to encrypt. So for the server URL, I'm going to change it to the IP address of my VPS, which we can get here. So I'm going to copy that, I'm going to go back to the config, and I'm going to paste it in on this part here. With that IP address now pasted, let's focus our attention down below, and it says for production, we want to listen to all interfaces. So I'm going to uncomment the one it recommends and comment the one it was currently using. And once you've done that, you want to Control-O to save it. So now that's written, and we're ready to get on to the next step. The next step, now that we've configured it, is to start the service. So sudo systemctl start Headscale. That's done. And then the next one is to check that it's actually running. So with any luck, we should get some green text saying this is running. Yep, active, running, excellent. So Control-C, we'll quit out of that. And now we're pretty much ready to go. But with Oracle, there's a few quirks. So one of the first things we need to do is actually open up the firewall. And that's not just the firewall IP tables in this case on the Ubuntu server. This is actually the firewall that's on at the VPC level, the virtual private cloud, within which our virtual private server sits. That might be complex, let me walk you through it. Head back over to Oracle, and we want to go back to Oracle Cloud, and we want to click on Virtual Cloud Networks. In Virtual Cloud Networks, I'm going to click the top one here, ignore the bottom one, that's the one I've created previously for testing. So click on this one, and the key bit here is to go down to the network security groups, and we want to create a network security group. Now, the network security group is basically a software-defined firewall. I'm just going to give this the name as default. I'm going to hit next, and this is where you probably see the more familiar firewall rules. So we can specify both ingress and egress. So that's inbound and outbound traffic. Now, for us, the crucial part here is the ingress. We need this to be publicly available on the ports that Headscale is running on. So in this case, it's port 8080. So for the source type, I'm going to use a CIDR rule. So that's classless interdomain routing. And the source CIDR, I'm going to say anything. So 0.0.0.0/0. That means any. So anyone in the world can query this on port 8080. If, for instance, you want to restrict that, you could obviously geo-restrict it to your territory. So for the destination port, we need to set 8080, and you can only do that if you select off all and you want to specify something. In this case, it uses TCP. So I'm going to select TCP, I'm going to put in 8080. When I've done that, I'll click create. And now that means that basically anyone in the world can reach my server on port 8080. So with that completed, we're now allowing port 8080 through the Oracle VPC, which means when you try and reach this, Oracle's going to allow it through and it's going to pass it to the VPS. So a bit like your firewall sending the traffic through to your proxy. So now that we've enabled port 8080 in our VPC, I've tried to connect to this machine in the background, because as we know from the last video, you can connect and do the /Windows and it'll give you the instructions for how to connect to this server. So I've pasted in my IP, I've told it I want port 8080 and I've done the /Windows, but it hasn't connected. Now that's because Ubuntu's blocking us. So the traffic's being passed through Oracle VPC, it's being routed to our virtual machine, but the virtual machine's not listening because its firewall rules are blocking it. So we can test that by looking into the VM itself. We can run the following command. And here we can see we've confirmed that it doesn't accept traffic from port 8080. So let's go and fix that now, and we can do that quite simply by editing the IP tables. So let's sudo, and then our good old friend nano again, into the following file, etc IP tables, and then the rules. When we hit return, we should see all of the rules above in there, and we do. So we need to add a new rule in here, and you can probably tell what it's going to look like because we already have a rule in there for port 22, which is allowing me to SSH into it. So we basically need to copy and paste this rule here and just add 8080 instead of 22. So let's copy this and we'll navigate down. We'll put return for a new line, we'll right click and paste, and we'll just change this to 8080. We'll save that with a Control O, we'll exit with a Control X, and now we need to make sure that this is updated. So to do that, we run the following command. We want to do IP tables restore and then write the new rules to it. Now that we've added that rule, just make sure you go back to your instance on Oracle and ensure that you have a network security group added to your VPS. If you don't, the rules won't apply, but fingers crossed, everything's up and running now. We've added the rule within the VPC and we've added the rule to Ubuntu. So this looks promising. We can now see that the Windows page is available, so that means that traffic is getting to Headscale on port 8080. Excellent. We're now at the stage where we can create our users and start connecting people. So now that we have the instructions on screen for how to connect a Windows machine, why don't we go and connect a Windows machine to start with? So that's dead straightforward. We simply need to download the Tailscale client. Now you'll see Tailscale login here, and that's because we need to use the Tailscale client to log into our Headscale. Remember that these two are basically the same thing. Headscale is just an open source implementation of the Tailscale server. So head over to the Tailscale website, download the Windows client or whichever operating system you're on, go through the installation process, and then we're good to go. So I've downloaded the Windows client, and I'm going to show you now how to connect your Windows machine to your Headscale server. So you want to fire up the command prompt and run as administrator. When that opens up, you'll see that we've got the actual command we need here. So let's copy and paste this command. It's saying Tailscale login, and then we're providing the IP address of the server that we've just configured. So when we paste this into our command line, we should get a token. Yeah, and it says to authenticate, we need to visit this website, which has just opened up in the background, and we need to copy this into our server. So this is a command that we need to run on our VPS. So if we go back to PuTTY now, you'll see here that it says username. Now, we haven't actually created a username. So let's go and create a username first. So we need to do sudo headscale user create, and I'm going to call this one desktop. So we'll see now that the user's been created, and now we can get this command here. We can copy it, go back to our terminal and stick a sudo in front and paste. Now don't hit return, press the back key until you get to the username. We want to delete the username and we want to put desktop. Now when we run this, machine home PC has been registered. That's the name of my PC. Even though we created a username of desktop, the actual PC is called home PC. And you simply want to repeat this process for basically anything that uses the Tailscale client and is able to access the web GUI. Another way to do this is to create what's called a pre-auth key. Now, you would typically use this for something like a Linux deployment on a server. So let's go and do that now. And the reason I'm doing this is because think about what we've just done. We've created the control plane, the controller, the Headscale controller, and it's hosted on a VPS. Now, I've just added my local machine that is on my local network, and it's now able to connect out to our Headscale server. But the Headscale server just controls the connections and the users and the keys, etc. It doesn't actually function as an exit node. So what does that mean? It means that we can't connect from the machine we just registered, the desktop machine, and route out because there isn't a client installed. All we've installed is the server. So what I'm now going to do is to show you how to register a Linux client, and I'm actually going to register the server itself as an exit node, as a client. So once I've done that, I'll show you both nodes are up and running, and we can then start to route traffic through one another. So heading back to our VPS, we obviously need to download the Tailscale client. So let's go and download that for Linux. We're going to head back to the Tailscale website, and this time we're going to click Linux and we're going to copy this script here. So this will be a script installation. Back into your command line, we want to paste this and hit return. Now that that's completed, we can do the same login process as before and as is detailed in the documentation, but I'm going to show you how to do it using a pre-authenticated key, just in case you need to do that. So we're going to register a user. So let's head back to our VPS, and we're going to do a sudo headscale users create, and then I'm going to say Linux. And this time we're going to create an auth key for that user. So it's headscale -- user, and we called it Linux. We want to do pre-auth keys create, and I'm going to not use reusable because I want this to be single use for security, and I'm going to specify an expiration of 60 minutes. So I've got 1 hour to use this key, otherwise it expires. This might be quite handy if you're setting something up remotely or sharing it with somebody. So now you can see that I've got this long code here. So let's copy this. And you'll see at the bottom, we can now log in using this auth key. So because we've just installed Tailscale, make sure you do the Tailscale command and not Headscale. So sudo Tailscale up, and then the login server is going to be the IP address of this server. If we go back to our instances tab, we can copy the IP address. I think we need to put http:// and specify port 8080, and then we need to do -- auth key, and then we'll copy this authorization key that we created a moment ago. So that's here. Now if we paste that and hit return, that looks successful. So why don't we validate what's happened here? Let me just clear everything. So if we now do a sudo headscale nodes list, now a node is everything that we've just added, so the 2 clients. What do we get? We've got number 1, which is my home PC, which I added, that's my Windows machine. And we've got number 2, which is our Linux machine, which just happens to be the same as our controller, so the VPS. Now that we've got those, we probably want to add one more. And in this example, I'm going to add my mobile phone to this as well. So I'll walk you through that process now. So head on over to the App Store and download Tailscale. Once that's downloaded, you're going to want to click Open. Allow notifications just so it can keep you up to date with what's going on. And the trick here, once you're presented with the opening screen, is to tap the 3 dots in the top right 3 times. When you do that, the changed server becomes available. Now, you simply want to enter your IP address, similar to what we've done in the previous setup. Remember to put the port 8080 on the end. And then you'll be presented with the login page, which you want to click Sign In with Other, and that's going to give you the same page as we've seen before, where we need to copy this command and use it on our VPS. So get the code that was presented on your phone and head back into your VPS, and we're going to create a user. So sudo headscale users create, and I'm going to call this one Pixel 6 Pro. So that's created, and now I can copy in the command, which was nodes register, and again change that username. I'm going to change this again to Pixel 6 Pro, and when I hit return it's going to add this user. And so now when I do sudo headscale nodes list, we can see that I've got all three devices. Now it's saying it's offline. That's just because I haven't activated it on the mobile app. In the mobile app, there's a slider in the top left corner, or at least there is in Android, and you need to activate this. So I'll go and activate that now on my phone. And now let me refresh now that I've done that. Now everything's online. So I've got all three nodes online. And now you might be thinking, great, we're off to the races, we're all up and running. No. And that's for good reason. Because you wouldn't just want to be able to add things and then connect to them. You'd like to be able to control what you can do, i.e. what routing is available. So let's have a look at what routes are available. So we run sudo headscale routes list, and there aren't any routes available. So how do we fix that? Well, for each of these clients, we basically need to advertise it. What does that mean? Well, it says to all of the other clients on there, hey, I'm available and you can route traffic through me, and or you can view some of my local resources. So I'm probably seeing some happy faces right now because, yeah, you can access services that are local to that client. So let's think of an example here. So if you're currently unable to port forward directly into your network, what you can now start to do, and I'll use the example on screen, I could be on my mobile phone and my local PC is also connected to this Headscale server. So because both devices are connected, the home PC is tunneling out and the Pixel 6 Pro is connected to the same server where this is also connected, we can see some IP addresses here. So rather than using the IP address that would normally be on its local network, once we set up these routes, we'll get onto that in a minute, we can just use this IP address here and access that machine. And if on this machine, we configure it such that local resources are available, i.e. local routing, we can basically connect to this machine through an RDP session, and then we can access its network resources from that machine, as though nothing was any different. Plus, you could go further and set this as your exit node, we'll get onto that in a minute, so that all traffic from my phone is routed through this device, and it would be able to access services that are internal only. So for example, on my network, my Pi-hole is internal only, but if my Pixel 6 Pro uses my desktop computer as its exit node, it can resolve piehole.jimsgarage.co.uk and access it as though it was on the local network, which is amazing. You can access services remote without having to port forward. Now there are two ways that you can do exit nodes. You could either specify it as an exit node when we created the first login, or if it's an existing client, you can then set it to become an exit node. So in our instance, we're going to use this command here because we already have our client set up. So the most important one first, or at least the one that you might be interested in the most, is the VPS. So back into here, let me clear this for you. Let's run this command. So we're saying to set this client to be an exit node. So that ran. Now if we go to the routes list, you'll see that this machine, and it's not very friendly named, but it's the name of this VPS, we can see that these routes are now available, but they're not enabled yet. So I'm going to go back onto my mobile phone now. I'm going to hit the three dots. I'm going to say run as an exit node, which is the same thing as here. And hopefully if we refresh this, we should see my mobile phone. And voila, we do, Pixel 6 Pro. Now back on my Windows machine, I'm going to go to the system tray, and you'll see that there's a Tailscale app there in the drawer. So I'm going to right click that, and I'm going to say exit node. I'm going to say run an exit node. It's going to give you a warning, but you can just click yes. And now if I rerun the same command, you'll see that we have all 3 machines up and running and available, but not yet enabled. So you might not wish to have some of your clients routable as exit nodes. For security reasons, there may be ones that you just don't want to be able to root out of. But just for this example, I'm doing it for all of them. So now what we need to do is change that false to a true. So how do we do that? Well, thankfully, all of these nodes have an ID, 1 to 6. So it's as simple as doing sudo headscale roots enable -r for root, and then the ID number. So the first one I'm going to do is number 1, and that's going to allow me on my desktop machine and my mobile phone to use this VPS as an exit node. So that's basically now become a VPN, something like NordVPN, where I can get my mobile phone or my desktop computer and I can route all traffic out of that node. So let's have a look at the routes now. We can see that this has changed to true. So I'm going to do exactly the same thing for my mobile phone. So in this case, it's number 3. And then let's check that again. We can see that now my mobile phone is. And I don't want to do that normally for my PC because I don't want things routing out this side, but I'm going to do it anyway just for this demonstration. So I change that to number 5, and now all of those routes should be enabled. So what does that mean? So if I go down to the bottom right, I right click and I choose an exit node, you'll see that because we've enabled these, I now have 3 options. So I'm going to choose the exit node, which is the VPS. So let me click that. That was easy. And now if I go to Google and I type my IP, let's see what happens. However, there's always a catch with Linux, and we need to do one final thing to the routing before this will work, and that's to allow forwarding. Otherwise, it's going to get blocked and we're not going to be able to use it as an exit node. So handily, the commands are available on the Tailscale website, and you'll find them here in this block. So I'm going to copy and paste these commands one by one into the terminal, and once that's done, we should be able to select this as an exit node from our Windows machine or our mobile phone and be routed out through this VPS. Thus, when we go to Google and say what's my IP, it should show the IP of the VPS. So now that's configured, let's go back to Tailscale and we'll choose a different exit node. So this time, let me use this VPS from my Windows machine as the exit node, and then I'll look at what my IP is. So that's now selected. Let's go to Google and type in my IP and let's see what it says. Well, bingo, there we go. 143.47.248.169. And if we go back to our Oracle instance, bingo, we've got it. It's right there. So let's just test that everything's working. Now I've got the ability to route my internal traffic out through Headscale on the VPS server. And remember, I could have multiple clients all over the world and I could route out over any of them. Let me just check that my mobile phone is working. So remember, we've now got an IP address of this, which is shown here. So if I want to change it to be my mobile phone, now just remember when you're doing this on your mobile phone, you need to hit the 3 dots and you need to say use this as an exit node, and do make sure you knock yourself off the Wi-Fi. Otherwise, you're going to get your home network address. And we just want to test that this is picking up different external IPs. So I'm back onto 5G. And now if I click Pixel 6 Pro, it's going to tweak that. And if I do a refresh, we should see a new IP address. And we do, 171.8. So now you can see just how seamless and how powerful Headscale is. I can dynamically change to different clients, provided we've got the routes in place, and just connect to them. So the last piece of the puzzle, and the bit that you're probably all here for, is how do I connect to my home PC from my mobile phone? Now, traditionally, you wouldn't be able to port forward, so you wouldn't be able to WireGuard in and connect, or not that you should ever do this, you can't RDP from the web to that machine. But the answer's been staring you in the face. If you look here on this nodes list, you will see the IP address that's given to my machine. It's 100.64.0.1. So, given that all of these machines are on my Headscale controller, my Pixel 6 Pro can simply fire up the remote desktop application on my phone, or if this was your laptop, you could simply open up remote desktop and just put in this IP address here, and it would behave as though it was just on the normal local network. So let me demonstrate that on my phone, just so you can see that I'm connected to 5G, I'm connected to the Headscale server, and I'm routing through Headscale controller to my home PC. And at no point has there been a port forward involved. So opening up RDP on my Android phone, you can see I've already connected on the top, so there's the IP address that you just saw. Now, if I click on that, it's going to ask me to authenticate because this is the first time I've connected from this IP and those credentials aren't saved. So put in your username and password like you normally would, hit continue, and hopefully this will work. This looks positive, so let's accept and connect. And voila, who's that ugly beast? And there you have it. You saw my lovely face waving at you, which demonstrates that I was connected to my machine through RDP, through Headscale. There was not a port forward in sight. So thanks for staying with me on this video. There was a ton of preparation to get through it, so please do like, comment and subscribe. Now, obviously, I've only just scratched the surface of what Headscale can do, and there's a ton more fancy routing, etc. that you can do to implement more security, more granular rules, and create things like an access control list. That will mean that you can prescriptively allow certain users to do certain things. But hopefully with this video, you'll be able to connect all the clients that you care about, and you'll be able to quite simply use them as exit nodes or access others on your network as though they're on your LAN. So hopefully now you've got no problems with accessing your local network whilst you're out and about, and this is all open source, self-hosted on your own VPS, and it won't cost you a penny. Let me know how you get on. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you on the next one. Take care, everybody.